Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Peterson. Welcome to the Ministry Wives Podcast, a production of the North American Mission Board. Here, we have honest conversations about the realities of the ministry wife life and how to keep our hearts tethered to Jesus as we serve Him. Today, I have a conversation with Joy Ross. Joy is a church planting wife and serves church planting families. She's been married for 23 years and is a mom of 6. Joy and I dive into a topic along the lines of family life and ministry about those first few years, specifically in the church planting context. She shares what she wishes she would have known, and really that translates so beautifully into wisdoms in the first few years of doing anything new. So if you wrestle with ministry and family life questions like, is this normal? Am I weird? Are we even making a difference? And are we messing up our kids? I pray that this conversation will bring some things into the light for you and help diffuse the false power they may have over you as we tether our hearts to Jesus in the midst of doing a new thing. So join me, friends, in my conversation with Joy. Well, hi, Joy. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you.
Well, I'm so thrilled that you're here today and having a conversation with me. We are talking this season on the Ministry Wives podcast about all things family life for the ministry wife. And I think that we would be in agreement to say that doing ministry with your family is both awesome and hard
100%.
in whatever church context that you're serving in, especially in the beginning years. So we felt like it was important to talk about those first years of ministry, particularly in a church planning context. But really, so many of the things that we'll talk about apply to ministry life in every church context. So, Joy, I'm grateful that we're going to dive into your story in your life today and talk about church planting in the first years. So, to get us started, I'd love for you to share a little bit about your family and your ministry, where y'all are serving.
Okay, I am Joy Ross. I am married to George Ross. We've been married for 23 years. We tell people, we've been happily married probably for about 20 years. That is a funny story, but conversation.
So, those three, was it the 3 beginning years?
The first 3 years, those were rough, but God's faithfulness in all things, and so,
Mhm.
we love each other more today than, yesterday, so I am so thankful that, I can say that.
I know, and that we didn't bail. I'm so
That's
glad we didn't bail in
right.
the hard.
Yes, thank you, Jesus.
Yes, thank you, Jesus. Okay, you have 6 kids.
I have 6 kids, and Isaac is 20, and Hannah Ruth is 18, Abigail is 17, Jeremiah is 14, and my youngest 2 are London and Reuben, and they are 11 and 10. And so we are just all over the place, girl. So I just
You
sent my oldest 2 back. Well, my oldest is in college at Mississippi
Mhm,
College. And
mhm.
then my next in line, I just sent to California Baptist University. So,
Oh
just a few
my.
thousand miles away from me. So,
Because you're in
just
New Orleans.
I'm in New Orleans, and so we are just doing all the hard things over here at the Ross house
Ugh,
this year.
I tell you, parenting in and of itself is so much more than I thought it would be in both blessing, but in the hard too, and the stretch that never ends. And then
Yes.
overlap that with ministry because you also have planted a church.
Yes, yes. So our church planning or our ministry life, we planted a church in Senatobia, Mississippi. And then, God just really did a work in our heart. We were so passionate about church planning and about marriage at the same time that George started a network in Mississippi just for young church planners, to love on them, to kind of coach them. And our church plant allowed him to take a day off and love on these church planners in Mississippi.
Oh, I think that's so right. And my heart is for that too. So you've talked a number of times about the differences of church planning. What would be, just if you would think through a bullet list of some of the different ways in which ministry wife life is in a church plant?
So in an established church, you just have such defined roles. You know, you have youth ministry, you have children's ministry, you usually have, you know, people that help clean the church, you know, there's just such defined roles. Then you step into the church planting role and the aspect, and the roles are not as defined. You know, there's so many of the wives that I come in contact with, and they're like, I've been serving as the children's minister for the first year and I don't know how to get out of it, you know? And
Mm.
so we do all the things. Our kids are doing all the things. I love Isaac, my oldest, like just started working for an established church. And he was like, Mom, I had to try out. Like they have tryouts. And he was like, I just told him, like, I did it because this is what you do, you know? And so I love the fact that he's getting to see both of the roles, you
Exactly.
know? We need all the help at the church plant. And so your whole family's kind of, you know,
Hmm.
serving. And that's just
Hmm.
what we did to survive those first years. So, yeah, so I definitely think the difference is just the established roles.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think, I've even talked with some ministry wives who have been into some revitalization situations. And as their church has grown and revitalized or even replant situations, their role has changed because it went from them doing everything to them growing to have enough for paid staff.
Yeah.
And then what do they do? And that's been a difficult transition because now they don't feel needed because the
Yes.
Lord has provided people and staff to do those things. And so there's just some complexities that come on either side of that. I love that community aspect of it.
Yes.
That's really something special. So as you think back of those first 3 years of marriage and ministry, what was one of the things that you struggled with as a church planner's wife?
I would think probably my greatest struggle was expectations. I wasn't sure the expectation of me. I wasn't sure the expectation of my husband. I wasn't sure anything, you know, like just expectations in general. I just didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know I wanted to be a good pastor's wife. And so if that meant giving up, you know, night after night for ministry sake and for I wanted to do that, but I just didn't have very good boundaries in ministry life. And so it kind of led us to some a bad place just because our expectations weren't very clear.
Mm. I think that is a word that keeps coming back in all stages of my life is what are my expectations and what are the healthy things that I need to lean into. So if you would now knowing what you know, as you would look back to yourself who was wrestling with expectations and wrestling with boundaries, what encouragement would you give yourself as a new church planner's wife that can speak to those as encouragement who are listening today?
Ooh, I would say that you are doing a great job. I had 4 kids under the age of 5, and I was just trying to keep my head above water most days. And so the fact that, you know, I was trying to love people where they were while I was drowning as a new mom with multiple kids in diapers. You know, I mean, you're doing a great job. You just keep going, you know, like just keep going. Like I needed an encourager in my life saying, "Oh, Joy, like, I see you. You are doing a great job, baby,"
Mm,
And I did have that. Like, my mom was my greatest cheerleader, and so I'm very thankful for that, but I just think some of us do not have that. We don't have people in our life that are saying, "Oh, I see you. You're doing so good," And so the expectations that we have for ourselves have to be realistic,
mm,
and the expectations that we have on others, have to be realistic. Because I think as ministers' wives or just wives in general, we have some false expectations for friendship and for people of the church.
mm.
And we can't put that on them if we don't want that put on us. So yeah, so I definitely think that I would just be my greatest
Mm.
encourager and encourage myself to see that motherhood alone is hard. And so to give yourself a little grace in the ministry area and realize that, everything's not always going to be 100% all the time.
Oh, that's so relieving. I mean, just in you
Yes.
saying you're doing a good job, just is like, oh, because I'm a try hard perfectionist who has what I know it should be, or who I should be, or what is needed in the situation. And that is like
Mm.
my scorecard. And I sadly never score myself ever reaching that expectation, and so I live in this space of anxiety, but then also just shame because I'm not doing all I should do, but that's just not the truth. And to have healthy expectations, what would be, let's you and me just brainstorm for those listening particularly, what some healthy expectations are for ministry wives in ministry when you're loving your family who are in diapers and littles.
Yeah, you can't be at all things every night of the week, and that's okay, especially when they're young. George and I have this thing where it's like, is this sustainable? There's going to be seasons, and there's going to be seasons that, come and go, right? The littles don't stay little forever, as we all know, right? But, we have to look at things and say, is this sustainable? Is this just a season, or is it sustainable, or do we need a shift? That is like something that we use in our life. I taught full time last year, and my youngest two have dyslexia. And so we were driving an hour in New Orleans. There's not much for kids with dyslexia. And we were driving an hour to school that is just for kids with dyslexia, and it just wasn't sustainable. It was just for a season, and so we just kinda had to hold on, and I had to know that, like, I couldn't go to life group because I was exhausted, but for my family, this was important, and so I had to you have to just step back and say, "Okay, is this sustainable?" And you have to have, like, hard conversations with your spouse, and you have to be on the same page, and I think that those expectations with each other, that is what will get you through. If you're on the same page and if your expectations are the same for each other and for your family, then everything else is going to be okay. Like, God is going to meet you where you're at. But there's times that you have to make a shift. Like, this is not sustainable. Okay, so I probably can't, do children's ministry every Sunday and be able to greet all the people that are walking through the door and do it with a smile. I might can do it, but let's just say I'm not going to be smiling by the end of the day. Things are not going to go well. So I think that if we are clear, if we have realistic expectations with each other, then it's just such a better start.
It is. That's such a great word. And having those hard conversations with your husband is often not very fun because,
Mm.
and this is just how I have felt in those situations. And granted, I've not been in a church planning situation, but in ministry overall, knowing how much my husband was carrying and the weight of ministry and his job. And he wasn't an I mean, he wasn't a lead pastor, he was an executive pastor. And not wanting to burden him with me not doing the things now, but yet knowing that I was about to just break by teaching the Bible study, by doing the Wednesday morning, by Wednesday evenings, by mentoring people. And it never changed, it never shifted as I added
Right.
a baby to the scene. So I think that that conversation with the husband is huge, and it may not be resolved in one conversation.
Yes. Don't we want it to be, though? We want it to be easy and we want it to be fixed. We're such fixers, but sometimes we just have to speak truth and let them wrestle with it and
Yeah.
then come back and like not respond immediately. I am really good. And sometimes George was really good at like wanting to give like the 3 point plan for what's going to make this better, that preacher in him, but he had to learn as well. Like, okay, let me just hear and let me wrestle with this a few days, and then let's come back together and let's come up with a plan that is sustainable.
I think that's really good, and I think ministry wife, your those who are listening, your marriage, and if you're at the point of just being so weighted down with all that you're to doing, I would just encourage you to talk with the Lord first and say, is this something that is where a shift needs to happen? And then begin
Mm,
praying for the conversation with your husband, because I understand the tension that can come and the burden you may feel by putting another burden on him by not doing the thing that you've been doing. But by articulating, this is where it's helped me in those conversations, articulating how I'm feeling, because there's no way
mm.
to fix that. There's no 3-point plan I mean, actually they can try, but really, I mean, there's no denying the fact I'm feeling. And some of the ways that I said it is, listen, babe, I am so exhausted that I can't even think straight. There are so many things that are falling through the cracks here at home that I'm not able to do because I'm serving in all these ways. I wanted to let you know, and maybe we can talk through a plan to ease up on some of those things for me so that I can fully focus on our kids or the laundry or even my own
Yes.
margin.
Yes, yes, I think that's so wise, and I think that in the long term, that when your family is thriving, that the church will be thriving, like, if you are at home and then you can get those things kind of in line, that other things tend to follow, and that your husband will be more at peace with that.
It's true, whether he knows it or not.
Right,
Whether he knows
exactly.
it's the end result. But I would just say, if it doesn't, if you're like, there's no way I can have this conversation with my husband, begin praying about it. That's
Mm,
all that would be the starting spot. Be praying about it, ask the Lord for direction and wisdom, and ask the Lord to soften your husband's heart. It has been amazing. Or even see what he would do in having your husband's eyes be opened. God just can do anything. And I think we sometimes do the try hard, let's fix it ourselves, and don't engage Him
mhm,
in any solution. And He is the one that can do it better than we can. And it may take some time and it may take some persevering and enduring. But, ladies, it is so worth it to have that level of communication and with your husband, and also not being burned out and exhausted all the time. So, I think I'm glad that you brought that up, and there's so many ways in which that has looked like in my life, and how many times that there's been hard conversations my husband and I've had, and we didn't see eye to eye. And I just had to kind of sleep on it and pray about it and then circle back around. But ultimately, if both of you are pursuing the Lord and the best for each other,
mhm,
that's where the connection will come. And we've gone through marriage counseling because we weren't seeing eye to eye on certain things. And so if you need outside help to come in and give you that perspective for you both to see that is a tool that God provides for us.
I was about to say the same thing. That is so useful. And I think that there are people, and it's gotten better, right? But 20 years ago, like that was just looked down upon to think like you might need somebody else's to just come in and just listen to both opinions and to give you some counsel. And I think that that is a great thing to do. We challenge our congregation to do that, right? We want them to get help if they need it, but as the pastor, you have to be willing to be able to be okay with that, to be able to be okay to sit in front of somebody and say, We just don't have it together. Like, we need some help. And that's okay, my friend. Like, girl, it is okay. Yes. Like,
It
go get some help. Everyone is going to benefit.
it is so true, and it may feel scary at first, and being the one who always helps in the role of a ministry wife, but then
Right.
having the tables turned and having to be the one who asks for help really puts you in a beautiful place of humility. It doesn't feel beautiful at the time, but the humility is what God calls us to be anyway. And so if just to practice humility, to ask for help, it's going to be worth it. There are some resources that NAM partners with a focus on the family to provide help for ministry couples, ministry ministers, ministry wives, and we'll link that on our show notes. So that if anybody doesn't know even where to start to have a quiet, maybe safe and confidential place to reach out for help, that is an amazing resource that is provided for us.
I do think that's important because as minister wives, we don't feel like anything's safe or
Yeah.
confidential. And I think that's important to be noted that, the ministry and the help provided is all confidential. So it's not like you're telling your neighbor down the road that your life is falling apart. And it doesn't have to be falling apart to need counseling.
Mm-mm.
Not everything. It's just those little things that add up. So I love that.
That's so good. Well, let's talk for just a minute about your marriage in the midst of being a mom and the family, in the midst of church planting, and then such a broader scope of serving planters' wives and planters' couples. How do you prioritize and how do you really create safeguards for you and George to keep each other as priority in the midst of so much stuff going on?
Okay, well, we do several things. One of my favorite things that we have started to do, and we've done for a while, is just to calendar with each other. Going back to expectations, it
Wow.
helps me so much to
Mm,
know what does this week hold? What does his calendar look like? What does my calendar look like? Because I don't know about you, but if you've had dinner on the table and somebody's late, there's just nothing that'll just ruin that moment for you? But it's all because, like, your expectations, I thought you were gonna be home at this time, and he thought that this was happening tonight, and so it has fixed so many issues, just sitting down with each other and having just that conversation about, "Okay, what does this week look like? What would you like to do, just to meet each other where we're at this week?"
When do y'all do that?
Yeah, we usually do it, on Sunday afternoons. We have that Sunday nap from Jesus and then, get up and, kinda get that afternoon coffee and then just kinda have a little time, 30 minutes, and it's usually without the kids, like on the porch or just somewhere quiet where we can communicate what's coming up this week because he travels and so I need to know like, okay, gear up, and but it doesn't matter really what you do, but if you both are on the same page and your mind is set like, oh, let's take on the world together this week, and that has helped us so much and I love it and I look forward to it. And then we can calendar special things, if there's a time where it's just like, okay, like I really see, you know, one of my children need just a little bit more time this week. They just need a little word from you, you know? So then we make that happen, you know, put that on his calendar or put that on my calendar and he has the other kids, you know? So it just can make your week or break your week if you don't know what's going on. And there's so much that we're so busy that we just don't know. And then that just creates conflict. And so calendaring has changed our lives.
That is such a great practical tip, and I would think with 6 kids, there's so many, and I know 2 are off in college, but there's just so many parts and pieces that you're
Yes.
having to manage, and I just recently have begun scheduling my own life, and it has alleviated so much anxiety of what's going to happen because I am not a spontaneous person. I like to have things planned, and I have my little block for the different things. And Brandon and I, my husband and I, talk about it some, but we haven't necessarily been intentional to do it at the first of the week. And maybe we should start that because we now just have one kid at home. Our two other boys are graduated, and then one's still in college. But that would be really helpful just to feel like you're a force together to attack
Yes.
the busy.
Yes. Yeah. Because it's just when you're on the same page, it just feels like things are good and things are connected. And when you're connected, it really feeds into intimacy, it
Mm.
feeds into friendship. But if you're on two separate pages, just running different lives, it's really hard to be joyful when you're running two different lives, you know? And it's just the world and you have to fight against the busyness, you know? So that's really helped us. I know that's really practical, but
Ooh,
it's like
good.
30 minutes. 30 minutes, get it done, baby. Let's go, you know?
Let's hit Monday morning. Let's get
That's
going.
right.
Well, Joy, I know that we both love God's word and is the source of life for us. I'm just curious, has there been a scripture that has been an anchor to you in ministry life, or one that you're holding on to right now?
Just for the church planting, living in New Orleans, God has really just brought this home. It's Jeremiah 29, and it's 4 through 7. It says, "This is what the Lord of the armies, the God of Israel, says to all the exiles I deported from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and live in them, plant gardens and eat their produce, find wives for yourselves and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters to men in marriage so that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there, do not decrease. Pursue the well being of the city I have deported you to. Pray for the Lord on its behalf, for when it thrives, you will thrive." And I love that verse. Jeremiah talking to the Israelites in exile, get
Mm.
busy, love the city. And
Ooh,
that's been so precious in our church planning journey. And it is just a good word.
it
And
is.
every time I hear it, I'm like, get busy, love the city,
Ooh.
love where you're at, you know, and context matters,
It
you know. I
does
mean, go figure,
because they didn't
right?
want to be there. They were in
They
slavery. They were in bondage.
yeah,
Yeah. And God saying love the city there. I mean,
yeah, and go,
that's
go forth.
deep.
Yes. And so, yeah, so that is definitely one that, just I hold on to. And then there's another one, that I'm sure everybody loves about First Peter 4:8. Just cast all your anxiety on him for because he cares for you. I think right now my youngest two are in a school that does not, has nothing for dyslexia. And so I mean, I am just having to trust that he loves them and that he cares for them, and that every day, that I just have to cast that anxiety on him. And I know as minister wives, we hear that verse and we're like, oh yeah, but honestly, every day, just casting my anxiety on him because he cares for me. So that's one I'm holding on to currently.
That's so good. And that's so real. And it's such an encouragement to me too, because it's action oriented. It is not
Yes.
just sitting in the middle of it. It is casting it off of you and onto him, and that is that happens a lot. I mean, I'm just like, that's not just a morning thing. That's like, right, throughout the day. And when those thoughts come up, and so it's constantly. And so just because you have to do it constantly doesn't mean it's not working. It's the very
Right,
essence of what he's calling us to do because he cares for us.
right.
Joy, that was so good. And so many things of encouragement and practical tips that I know both our hearts pray that they landed on places of those who are listening that needed to hear that today. So I'm so grateful that you joined me in this conversation.
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you for allowing me, and thank you for letting me just be real and nervous, because this is maybe not my strength, but God can use all the things. And so I'm really just kind of leaning into the hard things. So I can be a cheerleader all day long, but speaking to you or
Yeah,
sharing it's not my
yeah.
just natural.
Well, I know that the Lord will use it. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're so welcome. It was nice to meet y'all.
Thanks so much for listening to the Ministry Wives podcast, a production of the North American Mission Board. If this conversation was helpful to you, please share it with a ministry wife friend. Also, you can subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform to make this content easier for others to find. And you can find this podcast and other helpful resources at ministrywivespodcast.com.